I'm going to ask that we all bow our heads in prayer.
Just start rattling off all the bad things I've done till you get tired of hearing about it, or what?
I'm going to talk to you about the judge of the fatherless.
I'm sure he doesn't mean to be so difficult, Mrs. Cleaver. It's just that he's at the age where he doesn't realize how important it is to keep a promise.
Which Bible stories you want to hear? It's just a Sunday school.
Thanks, Dad.
Well, welcome to the Faith of the Fathers podcast, where we are reigniting the calling of men in the world. I am your host, Carl Gessler. One of the major callings of men is to be those who expose the deeds of darkness. We're supposed to protect the innocent, which means doing war with injustice. And we are living in a time where injustice is becoming institutionalized in our nation. But there's one person I know who is fighting that. There's more than one, but this particular person has been fighting it very effectively and has been encouraging me along the way, and I'm honored to do an interview with him today. His name is Dr. David Clements. He is a professor. He has a doctorate as a professor of law as he teaches at the New Mexico University. He has been on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News. He's been on Steve Bannon's War Room multiple times. The reason he was on these shows, one was for standing up against critical race theory, which is basically communism in the classroom in the United States. And he's also been on Steve Bannon's War Room because he has been a major part of the effort to audit every state in the United States of America. If you have not been paying attention to politics, maybe you don't know, but there was massive, massive fraud in our last election. Why does this matter? Because if we don't have honest elections, we don't have law and order. And in a world where law and order doesn't exist, the person with the biggest guns wins. The tyrant wins. The bully wins. They rule the playground. And it's our job to defend the innocent, to stand up for the truth. A lot of times we aren't doing this because we are still trying to figure out ourselves. We're not really aware of our surroundings. A lot of times as dads, we're not even really engaged with parenting like we should be because we're still trying to find healing from our childhood. We were made to be order bringers in the world. That's part of what it means to be a bearer of God's image. God created a world. He took chaos and he brought it into order, and he called the human race to do the same. But we, because we are sinners, we are oftentimes chaos bringers. How do we go from being a chaos bringer to being an order bringer? Professor Clements is going to share his own journey, because when I look at him now, he looks like a very well put together, accomplished law professor who is doing a very noble work for this country. But it has not always been that way. David did not come from order. He came from chaos, and God has brought order in his life. So I'm excited to share his testimony with you, and also to share his work with you, because this is something we all need to care about. Even if you don't live in the United States, and I know not everyone who listens to this podcast listens in the United States, it doesn't matter where you live. You are called to bring order into your world. And sometimes that means speaking truth to powerful people who can hurt you, and you do it just because it's the right thing. And David Clements is doing that, and I think we can learn from that. So here is my interview. Well, on the line with me today is a very special guest, David Cale Clement. And for those of you who don't know who David is, and I think a lot of my podcast audience will not know who you are, I'm excited to introduce you. So I wrote like a little description of you, so you can let me know, David, if this is accurate. But you're a doctor, a lawyer, the professor of law at New Mexico University, a former candidate for U.S. Senate. You're a freedom fighter. You're a host of a newly christened podcast, The Professor's Record. You're a new target of George Soros. You're a husband, a father of 3, and a Christian, and currently you're fasting coffee and water.
That's right.
Well, there's only a couple corrections there. You're mostly right. My name is David Clements.
Ah,
Just the pronunciation. Kale is my mother's Hawaiian, so we all were given Hawaiian middle names. And then the only other thing that I would distinguish, just because I don't want to get in trouble, even though I like the sound of it, is I do have a doctorate, and that's my Juris Doctorate. But I'm not. I don't want people to think that I'm a medical doctor and
right,
a lawyer.
right.
That would be really cool. But I know that if I don't say that, someone will say he let him pass by saying he's a medical doctor. What kind of yeah? So that otherwise, I think your description's spot on.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for the explanation because I was going to ask you about that middle name. So it's Kale. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Kale. Very good. And it's Clements. I did hear it pronounced that way and promptly forgot it, so I apologize for that. So, um, on this podcast, my whole passion, our theme for it is to reignite the calling of men to be what God made us to be. With the broken homes that so many people have come from, a lot of times we really don't have a vision of who we should be. And you've been a breath of fresh air to me, just because, like many of us, ever since even before November 3rd, but especially after November 3rd, we've been all looking around saying, what is going on? There's something deeply wrong. And I stumbled upon Linwood and saw some of the things he was posting. And actually, the first thing I heard him speak in Georgia at the Stop the Steal rally. But the way he spoke about America and what was wrong with what was going on, I resonated. I wept. I literally wept listening to him because it was the kind of thing I had waited really all my life to hear a public figure say about our country. And I've always loved our country. And then by following him, I got introduced to you. And one of the things I really appreciate about what you bring to the table is Christian wisdom, Christian judgment. You kind of tone it down a number of times and just remind people that we're called to be Christian in this battle. And at the same time, you're actually fighting it, which I appreciate because there are a lot of Christians who really just distance themselves entirely from it. And then in following you, I know that you haven't always been who you are today. So I'd love to hear a little bit today about why you do what you do, but I'd also like to know the journey of what got you here because I know you grew up in Myrtle Beach, and I've been to Myrtle Beach, and I don't think it would be a great place to grow up. So could you share with us today just who is David Clements? Clements,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. I was born in Seattle. Most of my life, my mother was basically the source of love that we had. My dad traveled all the time. So, I mean, I rarely remember him in the first 8 or 9 years of my life. I mean, he was always traveling. And so, memories for me with my dad are, picking him up from the airport like every 3 weeks. And then he kind of had stuff to do. And so he was there. I think he was trying as best he could, but he was kind of going through his own struggles. He was a whistleblower at Martin Marietta, which was the predecessor to Lockheed Martin. So we had like a decent upbringing for a short spell in my life where we had a nice home and the bills were paid. My mom was a homemaker. And after my dad basically caught a great level of fraud at the company he worked at, he was shown the door. And so instead of the people that were responsible for making sure that there was fraud, waste, and abuse in this company, they all got lateral promotions, and my dad was shown the door at age 40 with 5 kids.
Wow.
And I'm number 4. So there's that. So that was a pivotal moment because, for some people, if they grow up poor and they don't know any better, we it was kind of worse for me in the sense that we actually had things and then we didn't. And so I was probably a little bit more aware of what we lost. And because I was number 4, and we have one girl, so translation, my parents really wanted a girl, and I was kind of a means to an end.
I heard you
So
say that.
I've always been the observer. I just observed my family. And then coinciding that same time, my dad was raised in the Mormon church, and I was raised in the Mormon church as a young kid. Um, didn't particularly like it. Didn't really feel like there was a spirit of love in that culture. I mean, there's definitely a workspace culture where people are very moral. They follow rules. But there was a coldness behind it, and people that have been in the church that have left it would probably be able to identify with it. It's very similar in some respects to, I wouldn't say it's the same, but Scientology. If you run afoul of the membership, you're shunned and you're done. And so all of our social circles were within that church. So at the same time that my dad lost his job, he had a crisis of faith and left the church. And so at that point, we didn't have family friends, and the friends that I had were instructed not to play with me. So I mean, a lot of heavy stuff kind of early on, and then we all moved because my dad couldn't find comparable work. He was kind of in this really weird middle ground of like, okay, you're in some ways you're too qualified for us to give you a job, but yet he was so specialized in what he did that there just wasn't work out there for him. And it's a club. When you get into the military industrial complex, they don't want honest people that are making sure that your money's spent the right way. They want people that are quite comfortable with making sure that they get big contracts and they spend the money that they want to spend. So we went over to Myrtle Beach after crisscrossing the country several times growing up. And we all lived with my grandparents for a short while. My mom went from being a homemaker to working at Kmart and Lowe's Home Improvement. She worked 2 jobs. And my dad went from the aerospace kind of cool job to bagging groceries and filing insurance claims in a second shift at night. And so there was that. And we had, I guess I would say, fractures just already there because we were lost spiritually. I mean, so what I would describe as my dad is very well-intentioned. And my mom is just this wonderful embodiment of grace and love, but she's not someone that's going to think through everything probably like I do. And in that mix, we just had 2 absent parents that I don't blame them for it, but they were struggling and they were surviving. And so you had 5 kids that were raised or basically raising themselves in Myrtle Beach. And Myrtle Beach is a great place if you're a tourist, but if you're not and you live there, there's a subculture there that is it's dark, So seems like every 5 blocks, you're going to have your beachwear store, your bar, your clubs, your strip clubs. And so early on, I got caught up in, if I wanted things, I had to work. So I started working really early. I worked under the table as a 12, 13-year-old. I cut lawns. I worked at beachwear stores in the back where no one could see me. Often there's a few times where I lied about my age so I can get in, and they found out after the fact and they let me in. I actually bartended before I was 21, and I remember carding cops.
Really?
as an underage server.
Wow.
So I mean, I had a wild life, and a lot of it was just survival. So not much about my childhood was your traditional upbringing. It was like, I'll share this with you just to kind of give you an idea. We were so broke that I got like secondhand clothes, and I'll never forget this. I went to school, and I ran into the kid that gave away those clothes like 3 days prior.
Wow.
And it was, so it's one of those things where he's like, "Hey, you're wearing my shirt," and I'm like, "Oh boy." And then I'm looking around, and then of course kids are mean.
Yeah.
So it's like, "Hey, this kid is wearing my shirt," and so it was just amplified. Maybe no one else remembers it, but I remember going, "Oh, I must have been so red in the face." So a lot of my childhood is really moments like that where you're just looking at the world going, man, I had it good for a few years, and boy, does life suck, you know? So I'd be at restaurants bussing tables, and I'd look at kids um, enjoying vacations with their family and just like thinking, going, like asking God, am I cursed? I mean, am I cursed? Because
Mm.
this is like, um, you know, I'd work till 10 o'clock at night on a school night, and I'd walk home, and this was like pretty, uh, you know, not the worst part of town, but you can tell how nice where someone lives in Myrtle Beach by the avenue they live on.
Mm.
And if you're on the north side, you're rich. You know, so you go up to about 83rd Avenue North. That's where the nice houses are. You go down south, and they start getting a little bit more. I was on 11th Avenue South, and that's at the end of my street was a porno shop, a gay club, and a warehouse that where there's a lot of homeless people that lived. And I'd have to walk that as like a young kid from my job.
Mm.
And so you just got to see the ugliness or the underside of life. So that was kind of where I was forged and probably very confused. And then you know, getting into the restaurant culture, drugs and alcohol are in large supply, and I was basically raised by my peers.
Mm.
So I had a peer culture of kind of the pub, and so I'm sure on some level that I wasn't aware of at the time, I felt I felt hurt, you know. I felt like my parents, like, just nothing worked out, and so I had a chip on my shoulder. I was a bit of a class clown in high school. I liked to make people laugh. Never had any real ambition or thought that I was going to make it in the world. You know, it was like so I played in punk rock bands. So for me, it was like it was the here and now. And you know, if I wasn't working, I was at school, just kind of getting by, so I wouldn't get in trouble with the truant police.
Mm.
And then on weekends, I played live music with a bunch of punk rockers, and I drank everything that I could drink, and I smoked everything I could smoke, and I took pills, and um, all the way to the point where, you know, I was doing stuff in high school that people were introduced to in college at a super high level. So
Was that because you had no will to live, or it was just chasing whatever gave you an escape? Is that why the carelessness of it?
well, I think in my home, my parents talked. They got in fights a lot, so there was a lot of discussion of divorce,
Mm.
and they eventually did separate. But um, you know, to kind of give you an idea, like my sister to this day, she has a bullet stuck in her head. So when we talk about like a tough upbringing and just tough surroundings, I mean that's reality. I've got another brother that's been institutionalized twice for mental issues. So like we were like brought through the grinder.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think like that's hormones. As a kid, you know, there's girls that I was in love with. There's you know, broken hearts. There's you know, just bullies, and on some days I felt like I had like a providential hand with me. So I don't want to say it was all bad. There are times I can look back and say that, you know, God was certainly protecting me and preserving me, because there's so many times that I probably should have died from either drunk driving or just being out there abusing drugs. I mean, I had alcohol poisoning probably 3 times.
Mm.
So it wasn't so much like a death wish. I just didn't care. I mean, it was definitely a self-medicating. Like I feel hurt, and this seems to help with the hurt, at least temporarily. And then I'm also just a very competitive person, which this will sound really stupid, but you know, in that pub culture, you know, we'd have drinking contests or we would push our bodies, and um, I cultivated a reputation where I could do a lot, and it impressed my friends. Now it was dumb and it was mindless, and I could have killed someone or killed myself, but um, So I kind of had a little bit of a legendary status in high school. People knew who I was now. They would not see it. In fact, I had my gym teacher. I'm the only guy who got like a 0 in gym class just for pure rebellion. All you have to do is dress out, go through the motions. But this guy hated me, and I didn't like him. And I remember him like telling the whole class, if you want to see where David Clements is in 5 years, it's not going to be a fun thing. And I never forgot that. So that's childhood. That was kind of it. And
You never
yeah,
forgot that because that hurt because you thought there might be truth in it.
well, I don't know. Actually, I think that guy was he was a bit of a jerk, but
Okay.
I mean, like truly, he was a jerk. But I mean, I just remember I remember the teachers that were wonderful to me, and they showed kindness, and I've never forgotten them.
Hmm.
But there were few, and then I think I was, in some ways, justly um, identified as a troublemaker because I was. I mean, I got in trouble a lot. So
Well, let
yeah,
me
I
let
mean,
me
some
ask
of
you.
it's fair, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're growing up in the Mormon church, and you obviously had a conception of God. You asking, why am I cursed, or am I cursed? I think you said. Who was God to you? What was he like to you as a kid?
Um, I just thought in terms of I don't want to be separated from my family. Like to me as a kid, you just want your mom and dad to live, and you just want to be happy. So I don't know if I thought about it much more than that. I do remember that my dad made it a point for us to read the Bible along with the Mormon literature.
Mm-hmm.
The Book of Mormon, the Book of Pearl and Price, Doctrines and Covenants, are the big books that they have there. And I remember being baptized into the Mormon church, and I just remember it feeling very dark. I felt like I was under immense pressure
Mm.
to it's all through. You're kind of beat down, like you don't really have a choice in it. It's just what's expected. But at the same time, there were certain things that you had to remember as a young child. I think it was the Articles of Faith, and my dad insisted that we also memorize the Ten Commandments. So little things like that. These little elements of grace where I know he was struggling with the Mormon faith and not being able to reconcile it fully with the Holy Bible.
Hmm.
And so um, I got to see that struggle as a young kid and observe it. And I think it prepared me to ask questions earlier. He didn't really have the choice either because he was raised through the church, and it was basically drilled in. And when he left the church, his mother basically cut off all contact with us. So my grandmother basically left us too.
Hmm.
Um, so my conception, I would say, is I always believed in right and wrong. I believed that there was a God, even though I don't think I knew who it was through the Mormon faith. And then at some point, I went to some Baptist church in South Carolina, and the best way I would describe the Baptist church I went to was that these are people that grace was cheap. I'm forgiven, so let's go party. You'd know about the elders that were cheating on their wives, but they were elders at the church. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think on an intellectual level, not on a spirit level, I thought that, well, if I believe in this guy, I don't have to go to hell. This guy named Jesus.
Hmm.
That's cool.
Easy enough.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me.
Hmm.
And so I would say I was a nominal Christian that intellectually was fine with the idea that there being a God. I wasn't mad at the idea that there's a God. But that was the extent of it. So I would say that I was a nominal Christian. If you would have asked me as a teenager whether I consider myself a Christian, I would have told you yes, and I would have been absolutely wrong. There was no fruit in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was rebaptized as a Baptist, and I can tell you now I wasn't a true believer at the time.
Mm.
So it was one of those things where intellectually it didn't take hold, but I'm thinking, well, I'm kind of a bucket list guy. I'm an experienced guy. So yeah, that was kind of my faith journey. And then I tried as I may, I tried to prove myself, I think, to an ex-girlfriend that I wasn't completely worthless or I wasn't going to die through going into techno college. And I took some classes. And this is a girl that I dated for a really long time, was head over heels for. And she ended up, dumping me. So it was like just one thing after the other. I mean, I really just did the life. It's like, was it Charlie Brown, the
Yeah.
kid, the sad music? I mean, it's basically like, I hate to use the expression, like getting kicked in the nuts every day. I mean, that was basically it. And so I ended up trying to prove myself, worked 3 jobs while I went to technical college. So I went to school about 7:30 in the morning till about 9:30, part-time. And then I had a job at a physical therapist's office where I would wipe down sweaty equipment through the day, and then I would either bartend or wait tables at night till about midnight. And then on the weekends, I shined shoes at a country club, and I basically was able to do my studying there when there wasn't golfers in there. I could do some homework. So I had the 3 jobs, and I did that for several years, where it was just round the clock. And I was on. I took a drug. It was legal. It's called Xenadrine. It was just a fat burner, but back then it had this thing called ephedra in it, which was like speed. And I just took speed to kind of keep up, to try to get out of it. And what I found, I was just in this holding pattern, completely holding pattern, always treading water. It's like I think that I would work myself out of something, and then my car would break down. It would be like a catastrophic repair, and then it would be like now I'm late on rent, and I'm not going to be able to pay the bills, or there would be a heat increase on the heat, and I wouldn't be able to make it. So I was always scrambling to just try to survive. And at some point, I abused drugs and all that stuff to the point where I had a heart attack at the age of 20.
Wow.
And I might have had more than that, but this one was bad enough where I was pretty shaken. So I've had alcohol poisoning 3 times. I've had a heart attack at least once that was significant, where I was really scared. And so I could tell, I think looking back now, like my ex-girlfriend's like, this guy is not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And the people around me, I was kind of like the guy they wanted to have fun with. I wasn't someone that they really, want to hang out. So I think something inside of me, I wanted something more. I wanted to prove myself. But just, when you're raised by chaos, or you're raised in chaos or in a chaotic environment, we didn't have family structure. We didn't have God. I didn't have any of that. It was just like you're on your own. I mean, I could literally come home at 3:00 in the morning, and my parents wouldn't know whether I was there or not. And that was just the way it was. Yeah.
So you are, I mean, just sitting here looking at your room behind you. You have a lot of plaques on there. It looks like memorabilia, different things. But that list that I read at the beginning, you're a pretty accomplished person now. I mean, just to be a law professor, that's a big deal. That doesn't sound like somebody who had a heart attack at 20 from abusing drugs. What changed?
Yeah.
What changed?
It wasn't just that. I mean, I got arrested. I've been to jail for hitting a bouncer in the head with a bottle. I mean, the stuff that I got in trouble for pales in comparison for the things that I didn't get in trouble for.
Wow.
So obviously my life was full of just turmoil, and at some point I ended up moving to New Mexico. I had to leave. Basically, I had to leave everything behind, and it was weird. I went and saw, I can tell you the movie. It was Artificial Intelligence with the Steven Spielberg movie. I just went to the theater, and it bummed me out. It's a really depressing movie if you've ever seen it. And I went and saw it with my buddy, and we left the theater, and I just, on a whim, I said, I'm leaving. I said, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. And I didn't communicate to him, but I just knew that if I stayed in South Carolina, that I was going to die. I just knew it. And so I gave away all my possessions. I gave away my car, gave away couch, furniture to friends, and I got a ride to Myrtle Beach because I had employment options there, and I worked long enough to buy an airline ticket. So when I came out to New Mexico, it was with, literally it was just the clothes on my back. And my dad had retired out here with my mom, and they were still trying to work out their marriage. It didn't quite work out, but I slept on the floor here, and I looked for work, and I had a bunch of debt, so I wanted to pay it off. So, I was a guy that worked at a Walmart graveyard shift from 10 o'clock till 6 o'clock in the morning. I was there with all the convicted felons, and I'm just stocking. I can tell you, aisle 6. I'm stocking the shelves, and I'm just trying to pay off debt, and I was able to do that. I ended up going I quit cold turkey, smoking and drinking, just because I could tell my health. I just needed, and I didn't have any friends here, so it was kind of easy to do that. So I had been smoking also for about 10 years as a young in tobacco country. So like 6th grade, I was the guy in the woods smoking a cigarette behind school. So I just quit it cold turkey, and I had kind of my first sample of sobriety where I could think and I wasn't constantly just bombarding my system with kind of painkillers or drugs. And I worked, and it was humbling, and I was gone. I kind of just vanished from high school and all the friends that I had. And I still have wonderful friends there that care deeply about me, but they didn't know kind of what I was going through. So I left. And then on a fateful day, I was waiting tables. I still was working like several jobs. I always worked like 2 or 3 jobs. In walks into a restaurant a person that would end up becoming my wife. And so I waited tables on my wife to be. And I can't tell you anything about the encounter other than it was providential. I mean, she said yes to a date that she would have, 1,000 out of 1,000 times would have never said yes to.
Yeah.
And I'm actually not. I've had a lot of problems growing up when it came to like addiction, but I've always been relational. I'm not I've never been a guy that's like, let's just date and hang out and hook up. I'm just not wired that way. But so I would never just on a whim ask a girl out to, let alone someone that I'm waiting tables on. But it developed, and I just had this abiding conviction that if she walked out the door, I wasn't going to see her again. And we had a nice casual conversation. And I mentioned to her, because she told me that she used to go to a Christian school, and she seemed like she was a little kind of embarrassed by mentioning that to me. And I sensed that. I said, "Oh no, it's okay. I'm a Christian." And I really wasn't, but I in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I went to church.
Right.
And I think that was enough for her to give me a chance, because she's actually the exact opposite. She was raised in a very godly family, professing Christian from a very young age, valedictorian of her high school, highest honors in her engineering college. And we went on a date, and it was awesome. It was like it was the coolest thing. It was the coolest person I ever met. And I knew right then that I wanted to be with her. But quickly I found out that I wasn't the real deal. She was a Christian and I wasn't, and I was being confronted with someone who actually had genuine fruit in their life. And I could tell you, I was charming enough to where I could kind of lie and go through the motions, but I knew that the gig was going to it was going to be up at some point. At some point I was going to ruin this girl's life, and even worse, waste her life. I might be able to even trick her into marrying me by just acting like I'm this Christian when I had no heart desire towards God. And so I went home one day, and I'm like, man, I think, because we went from like this wonderful like period of like kind of the honeymoon dates, nothing can go wrong. I can put it together for about a day or two. And then we started fighting, and I could tell that I was hurting her. And so whatever it was that she was looking for, I didn't have it, but I just knew that she was the best thing that I had ever met or ever encountered. So I went to my apartment, and I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, and I said a skeptic's prayer. I said, "God, I don't know you. I don't love you. But this girl that I met, I do love. And this girl absolutely loves you, and I can't fake it. So if you are real, if you're out there, um, change my heart. Let me see you. And that was it. And I went to bed and I woke up a completely different person, completely different. Kind of the scales that fall from your eyes, the old, once was blind, now I can see, heart change. And it wasn't like I met or saw Jesus. I saw for the first time clearly my own sin, my own failures, and God has been good. So since then, there's been a gentle correcting, chipping away of pride, um, impulses, addiction, and I've been on this journey since 2003 or 2004, and can say that Jesus saved me. He saved me from almost certainly a death. He saved me by giving me a godly woman that I wanted. And every time I think I've reached a level of faith where it couldn't go any deeper, about every 2 or 3 years, I find another subfloor to the basement, and that's basically been my journey this past year. Has been taken to a whole nother level.
You said when you were dating your wife, or the woman that would become your wife, that you knew quickly that she was real. She was the real deal, and you were not. But can you put your finger on what it was about her that you recognize that this is real about her, but it's not about me?
Yeah, there was the way she spoke was so different. One of the things that I knew that I loved about her, we could talk about really heavy things. And anyone that's ever known me, I don't have a casual talk. I don't have that in me. In fact, I run from it. But we could talk about like really, really dark things on our first date, and she didn't go anywhere. She was grounded. So I was like, wow, that's great. I would have scared off 99% of the girls that I went on a date with by the conversation that I want to enter into. But I remember her talking. I think we had a little bit of a dust up, and she was referring to, I want to say it's Ephesians, about that husband-wife dynamic of Christ sacrificing for his bride, the church, and the bride submitting. And I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, she was referring to Ephesians. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing that I ever heard someone say, that she was willing to submit to a man that she would marry. And women that I dated don't talk like that, and I felt immediately unworthy of anyone that was, one, looking for a husband that they could trust enough to do that. But the call was also for me to be willing to lay down my life, and sacrifice may have a different connotation than submission, but they're both oriented around being a servant to the other. And you get back to Genesis, where we are one flesh. And so the idea of loving someone as yourself, and seeing your spouse's feelings and all those things as integral to my own happiness, like making sure that she's happy. So that was just like mind blowing. I'm like, it was the most beautiful thing that I ever heard, was her sharing basically the gospel and sharing Ephesians with me on what the ultimate love looks like. And I knew that I wanted that, because I'm a romantic at heart. I just like, that's amazing. I want it, but I just knew it wasn't inside. I'm like, how is she wired this way? And I've always been I think a quick study, and her parents also probably were very worried about me being the future husband. And so they were giving me like Christian books, like as it's like, here's a pile. If you had to like showcase their worry by the number of books they gave me, so I love reading, I love learning, and that was always part of who I was. So I read like Mere Christianity, and um, you know some of the more heavy hitting apologetic books for a new believer. And then one book led to another and to another and to another. And it ended up
That was before or after you said that skeptic's prayer?
probably around the same time. Because again, I was going to fake it till I made it. So people give me Christian books, even though I wasn't quite there, or I'd go to church with her and wasn't quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
But God was working on me through all of that, and my mind was illuminated. But it really came down to that pivotal decision that I knew that I could ruin this young woman's life if I wasted her time, and I had enough morality as a pagan to know that that wasn't something that I wanted to be responsible for. And it was hard. The prospect of lying or trying to lose something that I was really, really passionate about. But God walked into it, changed my life.
So when you said that prayer and then you woke up the next day, you said you were different. Can you describe the difference? Was it just like the presence of God was there? Or
Yeah, I think it was the first time where there was a calming. There was a spirit of peace that wasn't there before. And it's not to say that I was like it was Gandhi, because I'm a very people laugh at me because I bring up Enneagrams a lot. I love Enneagrams as just a way to think about personality types. And my personality type, without a doubt, is I'm a challenger. And anyone that knows challengers is sometimes we speak before we fully digest something. We rush in. We're passionate, and anger is an overriding emotion. And that anger, when it's righteous, can be very powerful, but it can also be pithy and destructive if you're not healthy. And so I was a Christian. I was a new baby Christian, but I wouldn't say that I was a fully developed Christian. I still had a lot of work that needed to be done. But what changed was I could just see things around me that I didn't see before. So if I was around female company, for instance, I was a decent looking guy back then, and so I had a lot of girls that were attracted. Or I don't think I would have had the radar pre-conversion, but after the conversion, I knew that I was in this relationship, and I was like this Jedi. I was just dodging things that just didn't feel right from a spiritual level, where I wouldn't put myself in the position, or if people said something that was just offensive, I disengaged, where before I probably would have stuck it out and just like, hey, I just want to be cool. I want to get along. So what I would say is the biggest change is that I felt a kind of a grieving for sin that I saw around me and my own sin. And truth became way more important, like in everything. That was the biggest difference. I didn't really have any major like spiritual. There was no like flashing light or any of that. It was just, it was all internal. And so when I would try to communicate it, but all of my friends and people that I knew were like, "You've changed." And in many respects, many of my friends stopped wanting to hang out because of my faith. And I wasn't like one of these people that was in their face about it. I've always been like, "Hey, my friendship to you does not depend on a conversion. I'm here and I love you, but my choices were different." So the old Dave that they would go out and I'd, drink a case of beer or smoke, several joints or pop pills, that just wasn't going to happen. And once they got a sense of that, it was like, Dave's not as much fun as he used to be. I was happier, but I wasn't fun. And as I've grown to see just how much Christ has purchased, his blood has purchased for me, I've had to kind of up my game. And in many respects, I felt like I had to make up for lost time with my wife to be. And so the credentials that we talked about, I was basically like a rocket ship after I met her. I not only did I get my undergrad degree really quickly, I was taking like 21 credit hours a semester, and I was getting straight A's. And the unthinkable for me as a kid was being a doctor or a lawyer. And I had good enough grades to try, and I ended up getting into law school. And after about a semester, I figured it out. And then I was on the dean's list throughout. Um, I excelled. I really excelled, and which was just really, really weird. So after that, one opportunity kind of presented itself after another, and wherever I've gone, I think I've added value to where people didn't want to lose me, and so I ended up getting a lot of stuff for my obituary. Here's the bachelor's, here's your doctorate, here's the professor position, here's I was a prosecutor of the year. I ran agencies at a much younger age than most, promoted, but part of that was just that willingness to enter into discomfort. I grew up in discomfort, so it was very easy for me to go into something that most people say you're crazy. I don't want to do that case, or I don't want to get in front of people and talk. So I think all of those events as a young man that were just hurtful. I mean, they prepared me to just kind of weather um, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm oddly very comfortable with turmoil.
Well, that seems to me that God has preserved you for such a time as this. And I want to get in I won't take much more of your time. I know you are a busy man, and I'm very honored that you gave me this hour. I'd like to get into that, but I just wanted to say, you said something like, I didn't see Jesus, when you said this prayer. But I think when your wife walked into your life, you did see Jesus. His presence kind of came with her. Not kind of, he did. He was in her, Christ in us, the hope of glory. And it seems to me that when she walked into your life, you encountered the real Jesus.
Yeah, well, her Christ-like, I mean, she's a godly woman.
Right.
And
I'm not saying
most
she is Jesus.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Her character, even to this day, she's the most honest, fearless person that I've ever met. And she raised me. I mean, I'm almost ashamed to say it, but she inherited a class clown, and she saw something in the class clown and supported me. And so she taught me how to be a student. She taught me how to have a work ethic instead of just getting by on charm. And my wife's work ethic is second to none. So people that see me burning the midnight oil, doing what I do, that's been ingrained by her. We make the most of every minute and every day. And so the thing, I joke about this, but it's pretty accurate. The thing that bothers my wife the most is seeing me sit down.
Oh, wow.
I mean, now I'm sitting down, I'm working in front of a computer most of the day, but if she was raised by a cowboy that worked.
Uh-huh.
That's
the opposite. In my marriage, my wife loves it if she can make me sit down. So we all have to be balanced out in one way or another. So I'm just tying what I've heard from your life together today to bring us up to what you're doing now. You says your dad was fired for exposing fraud. When you met your wife, you were afraid that you would be exposed as a fraud, and now you've become kind of a national figure because you're exposing fraud on a national level. And I just think that's an interesting thread in your life there.
Oh, it's even more amazing than that. My long paper thesis in law school was on the Federal Reserve, and anyone that's followed the Federal Reserve knows that they're the greatest fraudsters in history when it comes to destroying the dollar and making sure that they're not accountable. So I've always had a strong streak of wanting accountability, and I don't like bullies. I don't like liars. And so that was something that was a red pill for me. And then I ran for, I didn't run for office, but I ended up becoming a presidential delegate in Tampa during the Romney election. And I saw widespread fraud there in the party that I belonged to at the time. That bothered me. I came back and try to confront that fraud and clean up kind of our house as Republicans. And I was shouted down by all kinds of nasty people, and I ended up taking over the Republican Party in my county. I was the chairman, and we wiped the whole thing. So I've been in the battle for years fighting bullies and stuff in a way that hasn't been in front of a camera. As long as I've known what battles to kind of fight. And then I ended up running for the U.S. Senate back in 2013, 2014. And that's really the main thread. I mean, we talk about exposing stuff during that campaign race, where we suffered major fraud in one of our county conventions. My campaign email was hacked by my opponent's campaign manager. I confronted that person about hacking, and they sued me for defamation, even though I had de facto proof. So they tried to bury me with a lawsuit for 2 years in courts. And so after the Senate race ended, I spent 2 years, all my vacation time was going to depositions or dealing with court hearings or motions. So I got to see evil and corruption on a level that was so personal. It was so vindictive. It was so unjust when I ran for office, that was also a preparation for today, because hacking, something that's been on my radar, election fraud's been on my radar, and frivolous lawsuits, and knowing that you can get through them. And then after that, God wasn't done. He allowed me to become a district attorney, deputy. So I wasn't the guy, but I was just one step below the guy, and I ran Lincoln County. And I was able to get a PhD, if you will, on the most disgusting, sinful, hateful types of crimes and cases that you can imagine. So I've had crime scenes where someone's been beheaded, and I've had attempted murder cases. I've had people that were burned in a car after they were executed. And so for another 4 or 5 years, and it's like, if it wasn't bad enough of just kind of getting pummeled your whole life, it's like, I'm going to give you more. And so this place that I worked at was always short on resources, always short on manpower. And I got to see almost every day someone trying to avoid responsibility for their actions, lying to get out of trouble. So it's the genesis of all of that when November came around for me and I finally got my dream job, a cush job where I could rest and not see disgusting things, and I could sleep in, that vacation was short. Because I at the same time I was seeing everything that I had been focusing on for the past decade, on the emergence of Marxism and critical race theory, the emergence of how words were being inverted, how truth was just being sabotaged. And I'm seeing it through kind of a slow trickle where I could keep what's mine, I can get my paycheck, and I could keep coasting. And then the election happens too. And I just see, to me, it was clear as day. So almost everything that I had been using as far as a skill set to investigate and try cases over the past 10 years was on high alert. And it's almost as if time slowed down for me during November. I was tracking everything. It was like Neo seeing the bullets coming towards his way. I devoured every case, every affidavit. I mean, I wasn't a prosecutor anymore. I actually was, I was just a business law professor at this point. But the prosecutor in me, I couldn't ditch the fact that I had real victims as a prosecutor, and this wasn't abstract to me. It was like, this is real. I'm a victim. My wife's a victim. You're a victim. Everyone's a victim of what happened. And from November 3rd till today, I can tell you that I've, at a minimum, probably putting in 18 hours a day on stuff, and I had to keep up my occupation and keep teaching too. So it's been a journey, but I feel like God has just equipped me, and His fingertips are over everything, and that's a sliver. I mean, there's probably, if we had more time, I have another 200 or 300 examples of just stuff that you couldn't write the book. You just couldn't.
Well, Professor Clements, you are, 18 hours a day is an insane amount of time in a day to be working. How long can you keep that up? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel for us as a nation? Is this kind of the new normal of being in the trenches like this, or what is your sense of God's calling on you in these days?
I feel like I've been prepared for this time in my life, and everything that I'm good at seems to be what I need to do. And I've wrestled with contentment at other jobs about I don't really enjoy this. For me, there's no choice. It's like I get up, and there's stuff that needs to be done, and so I just do it, and then I try to do it as faithfully as I can, and I make mistakes along the way. But I would say there's a sense of time is running out, desperation, and you just do what you can bit by bit. And so the evolution started with, let's track lawsuits. Let's track these cases. Let's see if there's hope. Let's see if we can restore the rightful president. Let's all these things that I was consumed with because they were foundationally, they're necessary. I can't teach my students about the law if I truly believe that the law has failed us. And I truly believe the law has let us down, and I teach it for a living. So I knew when I did my Tucker Carlson video that went viral, that basically introduced me to most people. It was through an interview with him, that was seen by millions of people. And I just stood up to my university president saying, this is just crap. And I was talking about critical race theory. And I just happened to mention that about the election fraud. And apparently no one in the country with credentials was saying that there was massive fraud. Not someone with my background anyway. And I guess I was a bit of a unicorn. And then you just see people going, yes, he's confirming to me that I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
And that's been my contribution, is to reassure people, no, you're not crazy. This is how the courts should work. And then that's changed into, okay, we don't have accountability. So what are we going to do? We're just going to complain? So that morphed into, we're going to create accountability. So we've got a national audit movement where we're demanding full forensic audits in every state. And thanks to people like Steve Bannon, they've heightened my platform to where more people know who I am. Lynn Wood, as you mentioned, you followed him. Lynn Wood just happened to see one of my early videos where, because I used to, in January, when I didn't know anyone, I just did a YouTube live stream and I just riffed. We just call them rambles. And the first few people that followed me, I had dozens and dozens of videos where every night I just go on and we just check in with whoever's out there. And I did a breakdown of Lynn Wood's lawsuit in addition to many others. But Lynn Wood happened to see that. And I didn't know that. He's in Georgia. And then everyone started attacking Sidney Powell, misrepresenting her statements on a motion to dismiss that she filed. And I teach defamation, and I was sued for defamation. So I'm an expert in it. And I corrected that, and Lynn saw that video. And then the next thing you know, he endorses me on Telegram. And I go from having like 20 people on Telegram following me to 12,000 like that.
Yeah. And
then he does it again, and I'm at like 24,000. And then he does it again. I'm like at 33,000. And so I've gotten to know Lynn a little bit better. I mean, we've talked on the phone, and I feel like we're kindred spirits. But through things like that, through providential moments of getting on Tucker and being seen by Bannon, and Lynn Wood happening to be up at 2:00 in the morning watching one of my YouTube videos, it's led to this providential set of circumstances where I'm meeting Sidney Powell and John Eastman and Joe Altman and Jovan Hutton-Pulitzer, all of these people that are primary players in this drama that's going to save our country if we're going to be saved. If we're going to restore faith in our elections, I've basically been able to talk to and interview almost every single person that is fighting for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the past 7 months, my hope is that we've come so far since January. When people on January 6th, there's a collective gut punch where we all saw what we thought was the last opportunity to make sure that the rule of law would ensure that we had the right president.
Mm-hmm.
And that was gone. And everyone's like, we're doomed. And in that moment, I went outside and prayed when I observed that. And I came back in with a full tank and a conviction. And it was, we talk about seeing Jesus the first time. No, this time I didn't see Jesus, but I saw something else. And it was enough for me to come in and tell my wife, who was weeping. She was despondent over what happened on January 6th. And I just told her, we're going to be fine. We're going to win. God's got this. And I believed it. And I haven't ceased believing that for 1 second since then. And so every day, God provides me with a little morsel. It's never the full plan, but it's do this. And it's clear that I need to talk to, and it's people that, that I've found that they're not celebrities, but they were crucial in finding other people. And I think we're at the precipice now with what's occurred with Maricopa County in Arizona, finding people in Michigan, all of these audits, moms that are saving the country at school board meetings, getting rid of critical race theory. We're fighting back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've finally awoken that sleeping giant. And so I'm super hopeful. I'm more hopeful than I've ever been.
Thank you so much. And I would say you're a unicorn in the sense, too, that you're a Christian doing this, which is one of the reasons I'm drawn to you, because you have blended these two things together, which many people have separated with politics and religion. Mm-hmm. So I find fellowship with your words. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and please keep doing it. And I'll be praying for you.
Thank you, Carl. I'll leave you this with everyone that is making a huge difference are professing Christians. We've got some people that are being used, whether they want to be used or not. But Lynn Wood loves God. Yeah. Sidney Powell loves God. Joe Altman loves God. We have all of these people that they're not doing this for self-preservation. There's nothing about what I'm doing that is in my own interest from self-preservation. I still don't even know why I haven't been fired yet, other than God's divine protection. I mean, it's been that real and hostile at my workplace. But I'm finding that with Dr. Douglas Frank, Javon Hutton Pulitzer, all of these people, when I've talked to them and I've interviewed them, time and time again, you know who comes up? Jesus, God.
Yeah.
And so they're being called to something greater. And so I truly believe we are in a time where we're seeing the presence of God in a way that just hasn't been seen in this country for a very long time.
I agree. And that's why I'm scared and excited at the same time. And I'll just share this with you and let you go. But it just resonates with your experience, because I think it was that same day I was at my brother's house in South Carolina. We live near the border in North Carolina. And I was driving home just despondent, just mad, because I knew that the election was fraudulently being given to Joe Biden. And I just felt in my spirit like this word, no, it's not what it looks like. It's not It's not going to be what you think it will be. And so I just have hope in that. And your similar experience is an encouragement to me, and I hope that mine is to you as well.
It is, Carl. I'm thankful for you, and I love doing these interviews with citizen patriot journalists, or whatever you want to say, because the only place we're going to get truth is from we the people right now. We've got to get away from the mainstream sources, and so whatever audience that this video reaches, hopefully they won't be too disappointed in just how bit of a wild man I was. But I'm still fumbling about, and I'm still imperfect in so many ways. So I just thank you for taking the time to interview me.
God bless you, Professor. See that no one deceives you with empty words. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore do not become partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of the light. For the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, as you try to learn what is pleasing to the Lord. And do not participate in the useless deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. For it's disgraceful even to speak of the things which are done by them in secret. But all things become visible when they are exposed by the light. For everything that becomes visible is light. For this reason it says, "Awake, sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." So then, be careful how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. Ephesians 5:6-16, New American Standard Bible. Well, I strongly encourage you to make an account on the Telegram app and follow the Professor's Record. That is the name of his Telegram channel, of David Clements' Telegram channel. You will learn a lot. You will also learn how you can get involved in saving our country from communism. Communism is pagan. It's satanic government embodied. And that is not an exaggeration. I know enough about communism to know that that is factually, that is what it is. It is based on trying to replace God with the state. So it is something we should be engaged in, and you can do that with great help and encouragement from the professor at the Professor's Record, and the link to his Telegram channel is in the show notes below. Also, you can check out our Telegram channel, The Faith of the Fathers, so that you can be strengthened with daily encouragement to be the man that God wants you to be. And I do that through sharing quotes from the fathers of our faith, and just by sharing what I'm learning along the way. And I believe it will encourage you in the journey. So take a minute to rate and review the podcast, and I look forward to being with you again next week. I'm going to have my friend Josh Saltz in the studio, who's going to share his testimony. He says that there are he said half of the dumb things that he did as a teenager he wouldn't have done if his dad had simply been there. Dads are that powerful, and Josh's story is powerful, and I look forward to sharing it with you next week. God bless.